So Marin Schmidt now about to present this kind of terrifying study.
So we're going to start with just a little bit of background information about different aspects of the paper.
Can everyone hear?
Okay. We'll start with some background information.
There is a mic if you want to turn it on. It's up to you.
I think I'll be
Okay.
Let me know if
So everybody
I,
stop
like,
rattling
stop
and
it.
wrestling.
So following back from Tuesday, we learned amygdala has to do with fear conditioning, recognition of fear, and facial expressions, and threat detection and response. And then a little bit of other information. Projections from the amygdala to the brainstem are involved in expression of fear, and projections from amygdala to cortex contribute to the experience of fear. And a study in '97 compared patients with amygdala damage to hippocampus damage, and they were similar in being able to recognize basic emotions and pictures for every emotion except for fear. So there's obviously some connection with fear and the amygdala. A little bit about the disease that the three people with the amygdala damage had. It's called Urbach-Withi disease.
Yeah.
Something like that. It's a rare inherited disorder. It's commonly found in the first signs is when someone's just an infant and it's hoarse crying or a voice. And it's because they produce these hyaline-like material, which is kind of like a pimple or some sort of rash, typically in the throat, which is what makes the hoarse crying. And this blistering can go into the brain and other internal organs, which is what caused the damage to the amygdala, but overall, people can typically live a normal life with this disease. A lot of the things like the respiratory infections and the blistering can be treated with different medications. So besides any damage to the brain, a lot of it can be treated. The way that the amygdala is affected in this disease is that over half the cases they have bilateral symmetrical calcification, which is an abnormal deposit of calcium in the amygdala, or it's in the anterior medial temporal lobes, which would be the front middle temporal lobes, which is near where the amygdala is in the hippocampus. And so they're often affected because of that. And patient SM, which is one of the three, if you remember the three patients, it was two female twins and then patient SM. And patient SM, a number of studies have been done on her, and she is not able to recognize or demonstrate fear. So in the experiment, they had them inhale CO2. So a little bit more about that. Inhaling CO2 can naturally elicit fear. It just gives you a fear of suffocation because you can't really breathe. Your heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate typically increase. And kind of interesting, in the 50s, it was used for psychotherapy for two different purposes. One, to test how patients would react to an altered state of consciousness or loss of control, pretty much to see like how strong of drugs they could prescribe their patients. And then also to induce a reaction.
Not Freudian.
Yeah, the release of like repressed emotions or experiences, what you might think now a lot of people do hypnosis for, to try to free patients of their mental illnesses by getting into those repressed memories and experiences and emotions, things like that. So now getting into the paper, the hypothesis, bilateral amygdala lesions will reduce CO2 evoked fear in humans. The methods, there's 3 female patients with the amygdala damage and then 12 healthy females, and those females did not have any history of panic attacks or mental illness in their family. And then respiration rate, heart rate, and skin conductance was recorded for each participant. The respiratory rate is inhale, exhale, heart rate. And then does anyone know what skin conductance is or what it measures? Sweat, yeah. It's kind of like an indicator of arousal. I don't know a whole lot about it, but it goes off the kind of the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. And when you're getting ready to face a threat or some sort of issue, you'll typically start to sweat, which we were talking about it. There's two purposes for that. One, the sweat will cool you down, but two, it makes you slippery, so if you're like in a fight, it'd be harder to catch you. And then the salt in the sweat makes it a better conductor of electricity, and then we measure the conductance of the electricity, right?
So you would you put 2 electrodes and you put a tiny little current in one, and then you measure how well it is conducted to the other one. And so the better it's conducted, the more arousal of the sympathetic nervous system.
And then they had 4 single breath challenges. There was at least 20 minutes in between each challenge, and 2 of the challenges had compressed air and 2 were the CO2 or oxygen mix. And then after each, they would have them do all these questionnaires to see if they had any symptoms of a panic attack, how much fear, panic, anxiety, and anger they got from it, and then how unpleasant or pleasant the inhalation was, how intense it was. And this just kind of it's mainly used, I believe, to diagnose anxiety and differentiate from depression in a lot of clinical settings. So that was used for after each single breath challenge. So what did they find? Contrary to the hypothesis, the CO2 triggered panic attacks in all 3 amygdala lesion patients, and only 3 of the 12 in the comparison group panicked. And the amygdala lesion patients reported more fear, panic, anxiety, and found it more arousing and averse, but only in the CO2 trials. And this is from the paper, just to give you a better visual of it. Panic attack rate, and then this is those 3 of the comparison group that did panic, and the amygdala lesion, and those that did not panic. There's no significant difference between these 2, but there's a significant difference between these, both fear and panic. And the physiological responses increased in all participants, but they were higher for the amygdala lesion patients, and the respiration rate was significantly higher. So here's, again, looking at that, here's the respiration rate. Again, no difference between the comparison panic and the amygdala lesion, but a significant difference between the non-panic and the lesion. The skin conductance, only 1 of the amygdala lesion people were able to get skin conductance. They said the way that a lot of their, from the kind of pimples and kind of thing like that on their hands, it was hard to get the measure for the skin conductance. But then you can also see the heart rate. It's not significant difference, but a noticeable difference. And this is something I thought that was interesting, is prior to inhalation, the comparison groups, the skin conductance and heart rate rose. As they were preparing for it, they knew it was coming. But the amygdala lesion patients did not. So the authors suspect that the amygdala helps detect potential dangers in the external environment and prepare the body for it, similar to the fight or flight. So you can see, again, the skin conductance was just 1 person for the amygdala lesion, but it stayed steady leading up to the inhalation. But for the comparison group, they were preparing for it. So discussion, what were the big takeaways for you guys? What do you think was interesting or important to learn from this study, if anything?
So again, what were the hypotheses again?
That's
I need a reminder.
bilateral amygdala lesions will reduce fear.
And why did they just remind me again of why they believe that to be the case?
Because they believe if you do not have an intact amygdala, your fear you can't recognize or experience.
Can't really experience fear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when I read it, I kind of got the impression that it was their actual amygdala that was damaged, but then when you explained it, it kind of sounded like it was the messages to the amygdala. I forget which side of it, but you said something about I forget what the structure was.
No, back.
But it was the actual amygdala, or no?
Right there.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. Well, this was just kind of more about the disease, but They said that they all had amygdala lesion damage, so,
Did they have images in the paper? I can't even remember that.
no.
No images on these people? So they probably already did imaging on them and they know that that was their amygdala. That's a good point, actually. We know the connections are just as important as the amygdala itself.
Okay. So